Everyone. It is Wednesday, April 10th, with 37 days of school left. Sorry I'm not there today, but we do want to thank Mrs. White for offering her science class time to reserve for English. And I'm only going to do this for about 10 minutes, so it'll help you set up for today's lesson. Today's learning objective is you will be able to generate and justify an ethics question from our book. Our reading log is not character change over time, rather ethics. I apologize. It is page 215 to 221, and I do understand that I won't be there to stamp Tuesday's portion, and also, so just know that tomorrow, Thursday, that is, I will take care of both sections. When you're done with everything, you want to go ahead and proceed with read theory or even work on your chapter questions because there are lots of questions in your flip book. By now, you should have up to chapter 16 just to be on good pacing. And again, your flip book is due when your book is due, and that is about, since we're a little bit past the midway point, about a month from now. Your reading log is due on Friday simply because normally it's due on Monday, but it's due this Friday just because next week is spring break and I don't want you to hold on to this and lose it. Going to your reading log, you will notice that this section right here has three main ideas as usual and the ethics question. In today's reading for April 10th, pages 215 to 221, we see a new character, Mr. Dolphus Raymond. He is a white man who is surrounded in, who lives in the black community. And the children, Scout and Jim and Dill, kind of question that since it seems so unusual for a community that is divided. And this comes right before the courthouse, the trial itself. So again, we see a divided community because of Tom Robinson's case, since half the community is for him and half is against him. So they do question Dolphus Raymond, his motives, and they're trying to understand why he would be in the midst of all of this and he doesn't resemble that community simply because he is a white man in a black community. And we're also going to see in the conclusion of chapter 16 the first testimony where a judge and a jury hears a testimony and Atticus starts to question them in addition to the prosecuting attorney. So for today's ethics question for Wednesday's section is it justified to ask a controversial and sensitive topic? As you can imagine, these are kids. These are kids in an adult world in the sense where they are actually going to trial where it's open to the public and they're hearing all of these things. So understandably, as a child, let's say Scout or Jem, they're going to ask questions about all of these things and it may seem insensitive, but at the same time, they are just inquiring and wanting to understand. So as we read, I would like you to go ahead and find a quote, and I'll help you with a little bit with number one and then number two following. So if you can open your book and follow along, some of you may want to open to Google Classroom if you can't see the board. And we're going to start off on page 215, but to transition clearly on 214, right in the middle, Mr. Dolphus Raymond seemed to be so doing. Two yellow drugstore straws ran from his mouth to the depths of a brown paper bag. Ain't never seen anybody do that, murmured Dill. How does he keep what's in it in it? Jim giggled. He's got Coca-Cola bottle full of whiskey in there. That's so not to upset the ladies. You'll see him sip it all afternoon. He'll step out for a while and fill it back up. Why, he's sitting with the colored folks. Always does. He likes 'em better than he likes us, I reckon. Lives by himself way down near the county line. He's got a colored woman, all sorts of mixed children. Show you some if we see him. He does look like trash, said Dill. Now let's go back to this to the drinking for a second. It just seems for them to justify a white man in a black community to think that, oh, he may have an alcoholic issue. He may have some kind of consumption to even justify his actions altogether. Notice they already outcast him and they think he's weird. They think he's dependent on alcohol simply because he does those things. On page 215, they're going to continue to gossip about this Raymond guy. He's not. He owns all one side of the riverbank down there, and he's from a real old family to boot. Then why does he like to do that? That's just the way he is, said Jim. They say he never got over his wedding. He was supposed to marry one of the Spencer ladies, I think. They were going to have a huge wedding, but they didn't. And after the rehearsal, the bride went upstairs and blew her head off. Shotgun. He pulled the trigger. She pulled the trigger with her toes. Did they ever know why? No, said Jim. Nobody ever knew quite why, but Mr. Adolphus, they said it was because she found out about his colored woman. He reckoned she could keep her and get married too. She's been sort of drunk ever since, though he's real good to those children. Jim, I asked, what's a mixed child? Half white and half colored. You've seen them, Scout. You know that red, kinky, red-headed one that delivers for the drugstore? He's half white. They're real sad. Sad? How come? They don't belong anywhere. Colored folks won't have them because they're half white. White folks won't have them because they're colored. So they're just betweens, don't belong anywhere. But Mr. Dolphus now, they say he's shipped two of them up north. They don't mind them up north. Yonder's one of them. So now Jim is pointing to one. A small boy clutching a Negro woman's hand walked toward us. He looked all Negro to me, and he was rich chocolate with flaring nostrils and beautiful teeth. Sometimes he would skip happily, and the Negro woman tugged his hand to make him stop. Jim waited until they passed us. That's one of the little ones, he said. So once again, we conclude right here. Again, our ethics question is it justified to ask a controversial and sensitive topic? Now, let's go back to Scout inquiring about the children. And of course, some of you are giggling, thinking this is a silly question, but it is quite insensitive. And understandably so, this is a little girl. And with that being said, we almost justify her because she doesn't know any better. But what happens if it were a little this question came from an older person. So let's go ahead and answer that question. Number one, how and why are characters' words and actions controversial? Well, education produces compassion. So we want to learn. We want to ask questions. At the same time, asking questions can be offensive and invasive. And the word invasive means getting into someone's business, really going into Raymond's story about his wife, about his bride, about his mixed children. That's way, way into someone else's business that we have no business putting our nose into. So the next question is, after you find a quote that shows the insensitive question, ask yourself the next question, which is, if I were Scout, I would. Now, if you were her, what would you do? Would you ask an insensitive question and explain why? And if you would not, also state it and then explain why. Once again, guys, tomorrow I will stamp 2 days, so please do not feel stressed if one portion is not stamped. And again, I want you to read pages 215 to 221. And if you're all done and need a little more time, you have more time. That is, of course, Mrs. White is telling you to continue with your English work. You have read theory, and you also have chapter questions. And the chapter questions, you can always backtrack chapter 14, 15, and 16. And since today we are concluding chapter 16, you can answer all of those chapters right there. All right, guys, have a good one, and I'll see you tomorrow.